Hi everyone, and welcome to Extension Activities with Fractions. I'm mainly going to be focusing on fraction operations today, but I am going to introduce you to some really cool, really great ways of introducing and working with fractions using different concrete tools. The very first thing that I want to introduce you to and hope that you guys have got in your classrooms, and I'm sure you do, is the trusty cuisennaire. So I know that a lot of classrooms will have cuisennaire. I'm just not sure how much in the forefront of your teaching you have them currently. I'm going to use an activity today that's going to involve cuisennaire rods and how we can use them with fractions. It's a great way of teaching fraction addition and particularly subtraction. So the other thing is these origami paper pads. So if you can get your hands on some of these, they're fantastic. I think I picked these up from Big W for about $3. The other thing is fraction strips. So I made these fraction strips. I just basically took an A4 bit of paper and a guillotine and I cut them in 3 centimeter widths, and just making sure that the widths are as sort of close to accurate and concise as possible, because the idea of fraction strips is you want the area of the strip and the length, width, etc., obviously area, to be the same so that we can make some really accurate comparisons. Okay, so we are going to be using these to operate with fractions today. I'm going to start with my cuisennaire. So I'm going to bring in my trusty CRA board. Now everybody knows that I'm actually the CRA queen. I love these boards because a lot of the times when we do use concrete tools or manipulatives to help us work through certain problems, we're really good at using the tools, and maybe we might make it to the representational, we might leave out the abstract, and vice versa. So having this method and having these boards will encourage students to write at every one of these really important levels. So firstly, if you're not familiar with cuisennaire, this is what they represent. So your orange rod generally is your 1, but only if you're using it as the unit. Now I've got many activities and workshops that I run that use different units along the way, but for these purposes of one whole, I'm going to use my orange rod because it fits 10 of these cubes in there. So my orange is my 1, just for this activity purpose. Now I'm going to ask the students to solve this fraction, and the fraction is 4/5 minus 2/5. Okay, now this is probably around the year 5, year 6 level where students will start to work with fractions that have got common denominators or the same denominators, but often because they're transitioning from those whole number operations of addition and subtraction, there can be some very common misconceptions or misunderstandings that happen here. Most importantly, what can happen is the students will simply subtract the numerators and the denominators separately. So that's actually not what happens in a fraction, but very common misunderstanding. So I'm going to show 4/5 on my using my cuisennaire rods first. So whenever we do an addition or a subtraction, we start with the number. If we are doing a subtraction, generally we encourage the students to start with the larger number. Now these students, before they start working with addition and subtraction using cuisennaire, they would have had some practice with cuisennaire, and they would recognize that the red rod is 1/5 of the orange. So before they start doing the subtraction, students need to establish what is 1/5. All right, and then what is 4/5. So we know that if this is 5/5, that's a whole, then 4/5 will look like that. So I now have 4/5, and it's 4/5 of my 1 whole, which is represented by my orange rod. Now, if I take away 2 of these fifths, I'm going to end up with 2/5. Okay, so I'll do that again. Now, if this is my 1 whole, and this is my 4/5, then if I take away 2/5 from this 4/5, what do I end up with? I end up with 2/5. So 4/5 take away 2/5 is 2/5. So that's one way that you can get students to work with subtraction. You don't have to use cuisennaire rods. You can use grid paper, you can use paper strips, you can use whatever you want, as long as the tool that they're using identifies what the whole is and identifies the fraction that you're trying to use in your equation or in your number sentence. Now, as always, I try to get the students to represent this situation in a different way. And the idea behind it is because I want to expose them to as many different models or methods as possible. Because as we know, fractions can be area, but they can also be length, and they're a magnitude that fits along a number line. So I would get them to draw a number line. Here is my 0, here is my 1. Now I'm only dealing with numbers between 0 and 1, so ones that are less than 1 whole, so I only need to go up to 1s. I would partition my number line into my fifths, 1/5, 2/5, 3/5, 4/5. So you start here. I start with 4/5. I take away 2/5. Where do I end up? At 2/5. Now, if we're looking at our abstract, we know we don't have to do anything to this because our denominators are the same. So if I have my parts all broken up into equal parts, then I can simply subtract my numerators. So I end up with 2/5. Okay, so you can see 3 different models for the same method. So that's how I would encourage you to start working with introducing some of these operations.